Have you ever imagined what might be hidden inside something that everyone simply ignored? Think about it. An abandoned object, forgotten in the corner of an empty mansion that no one wanted to take home, not even for free. What could be so insignificant? Or was it exactly the opposite? Perhaps it was so important that someone at some point in history made sure to hide it. And what if I told you that inside that dusty trunk was kept a secret capable of changing lives, rewriting destinies, and proving that true love never dies, even after decades of silence? Nobody wanted it. Simply nobody wanted it. That's what auctioneer Robert Chen repeated, almost incredulously, as he stared intently at that wooden chest leaning against the darkest corner of the Winchester Mansion's attic in Massachusetts. It's March 2025, and that imposing property had been completely abandoned for exactly 47 years. Can you imagine? Almost half a century of dust, of memories frozen in time, of stories that nobody told anymore. During the auction of that historic mansion, absolutely everything was sold. Antique furniture worth fortunes, paintings by renowned artists, jewels that shone even under layers of dust. Each item found an eager buyer, willing to pay a high price for a piece of that history. But that chest, that specific chest, didn't receive a single bid, not one. People looked, frowned, and moved on, as if something invisible was keeping them away. Strange, don't you think? Robert Chen was an experienced auctioneer with over 3 decades in the business. He had seen it all: hidden treasures, family heirlooms, objects carrying incredible stories. But something about that trunk bothered him. It was a strange, almost magnetic feeling. Out of pure professional curiosity, or perhaps a call from destiny he didn't yet understand, Robert decided to do something that would change everything. He took his tools, positioned himself in front of the auction's security cameras, and opened that forgotten trunk. What he found inside wasn't just a collection of antique objects. No, what he discovered was capable of rewriting the history of an entire family the world had forgotten, of revealing truths buried under decades of lies and silence. And it all began with a simple black and white photograph, carefully hidden under layers upon layers of yellowed letters that were never, ever sent. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover will touch your heart in a way you don't expect. Before we continue, I need to pause here with you for a second, because I know this story has already started to stir something inside you, hasn't it? Maybe you're thinking about that old box kept at the back of your grandmother's closet, or those letters you never had the courage to open, or even that family secret that everyone avoids talking about. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever felt that there's something unspoken, something hidden, waiting to be discovered? Look, I want to ask you something very sincerely here. If this story is making sense to you, if it's touching your heart in any way, leave a comment below about what has impacted you the most so far. It could be a word, a phrase, a memory that came to mind. I read absolutely every comment, and each one shows me that we are not alone on this journey of seeking truths, of valuing stories that deserve to be told. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who need to hear these real, moving and transformative narratives. And if you haven't already liked this video, go ahead and hit that button now. It really helps to get this content to those who truly need to see it. And if you want to keep seeing stories like this, that touch the soul, that make us reflect on what really matters in life, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Because I guarantee, each video here is an open door to something that will move you, inspire you, or make you see the world in a different way. You're part of this community now, and I want you here with me in every new story I tell. Now, take a deep breath, because what Robert Chen was about to discover inside that trunk went beyond any expectation. The Winchester Mansion wasn't just another old property put up for auction. No, that imposing building carried within its walls a history that few knew, but that everyone in the region whispered about. Built in 1893, the mansion belonged to the powerful Holloway family, a name that for decades echoed through the most important halls of the American East Coast. They weren't just rich, they were influential, respected, even feared. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Holloways controlled businesses, shaped political decisions, and lived in the spotlight of high society. But like every great story, this one also had its secrets, its hidden truths that no one dared to speak aloud. And then, in 1978, something simply inexplicable happened. Eleanor Holloway, the last heiress of that very traditional lineage, disappeared. But it wasn't a recorded death. There was no funeral, no will read in court. Eleanor simply vanished, as if erased from existence. She didn't sell the property, she didn't leave notes, she didn't warn anyone. One day she was there, living in that enormous, silent mansion, and the next day, nothing. Just emptiness. The transformation was so abrupt that even today no one knows for sure what really happened that year. Rumors circulated, theories were created, but the truth remained locked away along with that house. By court order, the Winchester Mansion was sealed off, isolated from the world, as if it were a secret that needed to be kept. For 47 long years, that property remained untouched, frozen in time, while lawyers battled in endless legal disputes over who had the right to that estate. Distant relatives appeared from time to time, claiming inheritance, but nothing was resolved. It was as if the mansion itself resisted being opened, as if it guarded something that should not be revealed. Until finally, in 2025, after decades of exhaustive legal proceedings, the court ruled the property would be put up for public auction. And that's when Robert Chen entered this journey that would change everything. Robert was no ordinary auctioneer. With 30 years of experience, he had seen fortunes hidden in basements, jewels forgotten in drawers, rare documents that rewrote family histories. He knew the impact objects could have, the emotional weight they carried, the behind-the-scenes aspects of each sale. But when he crossed the threshold of that mansion for the first time, something different happened. The air was heavy, not only from the accumulated dust of almost half a century, but from a strange, almost palpable feeling. It was too silent, too cold, as if the house were waiting for someone, waiting for him. Robert walked through the empty rooms, observing every detail, the furniture covered in white sheets that looked like ghosts, the paintings on the walls with serious faces staring at him, the chandeliers covered in cobwebs that once illuminated grand parties. But it was when he climbed the creaking stairs to the attic that he felt it. That inexplicable feeling that every experienced professional knows, that instinct that says, pay attention to this. And there, in the darkest and most forgotten corner of that dusty space, was the trunk. Simple dark wood, locked, silent. But for Robert, it was as if that object was screaming, "Open me," without making a single sound. It was a silent call, an invisible urgency that he couldn't ignore. Throughout the auction, while other items were being fought over by collectors and curious onlookers, that chest was completely ignored. No one bid. No one showed any interest. And that, in itself, was a disturbing revelation. Why would an object inside a historic mansion, full of valuable antiques, be so rejected? What hidden truth did that chest hold that made people unconsciously shy away from it? Robert took a deep breath before touching the trunk. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from that profound intuition that only those who have lived through decisive moments can recognize. He knew he was about to cross an invisible line, to open a door that perhaps should have remained closed. But curiosity, that irresistible force that drives humanity in search of answers, was stronger. Carefully he turned the rusty key in the old lock. The click echoed in the silence of the attic, and then slowly he lifted the lid. The wood creaked loudly, a prolonged and sharp sound, as if the trunk were breathing for the first time in decades, as if it were finally being given permission to reveal what it had kept for so long. What Robert saw inside made his heart race. It wasn't rare jewels or documents worth fortunes. It was something infinitely more valuable and, at the same time, devastatingly sad. Piles and piles of letters yellowed with age, carefully organized and tied with red satin ribbons that still retained a delicate sheen despite the years. Black and white photographs scattered among the letters, faces frozen in time, smiles that never aged, gazes that seemed to traverse the decades and beg to be remembered. In the corner of the trunk, A diary with a cracked leather cover, its pages seeming too fragile to touch. And there, shining even under, the thin layer of dust, a gold ring with a blue stone that captured the light in an almost magical way, as if it held within it a lifetime of meaning. Robert picked up the first letter with trembling hands. The envelope was sealed, intact, never opened, and it was upon reading the handwritten name, in delicate calligraphy full of emotion, that he felt a shiver run down his spine. "My dearest daughter, wherever you are." He turned the envelope over and saw the signature on the back. "Your mother, who never stopped searching, Margaret Holloway, 1977. The revelation was immediate and painful. Eleanor had never received that letter. That letter, written with her soul, pouring love into every word, had never reached its destination. And the impact of this discovery was like a punch to Robert's gut. He opened the letter with extreme care, feeling the weight of that moment. The words written there were of such raw, human pain that it was impossible not to be moved. Margaret spoke of regret, of sleepless nights, of a love that never died despite the forced distance. She begged for forgiveness, explained truths that had been hidden, revealed lies that had separated mother and daughter, and she ended with a promise. "I will never stop looking for you. Wherever you are, my love for you is there too." But then Robert looked at the trunk again, and he realized that wasn't the only letter. There were dozens of them. He began to count them one by one, his heart growing heavier and heavier. Birthday letters, Christmas letters, New Year's letters, letters without a specific date, simply written in moments of unbearable longing. In total, 127 letters. 127 desperate attempts by a mother to reach her daughter. And all of them, absolutely all of them, were never sent. Or rather, they were intercepted, hidden, locked in that trunk as if they were secrets too dangerous to come to light. Robert's emotional journey at that moment was unbearable. He couldn't stop thinking, who would do this? Who would have the coldness, the cruelty, the twisted mentality to separate a mother from her daughter in this way, to rob Eleanor of the chance to know that she was loved, that she had always been loved, that she had never been abandoned? And why? What was the motive, the justification, the logic behind such a cruel decision? Robert sat on the dusty attic floor, surrounded by those letters, and began to read them one after another. Each letter was a piece of heartbreak, a silent plea, proof that true love doesn't give up, even when the whole world conspires against it. Margaret had written for years, decades even, keeping alive the hope that one day, somehow, her daughter would know the truth. But someone ensured that this would never happen. Someone made the decision to hide everything, to erase the truth, to keep mother and daughter eternally separated. And now, almost 50 years later, that trunk was there, open, revealing the behind-the-scenes story of a family tragedy that no one ever imagined. The transformation that discovery brought about in Robert was instantaneous. He was no longer just an auctioneer doing his job. He was now a guardian of a hidden truth that needed to be revealed, that deserved to be known, that could not remain hidden. If you're feeling the weight of this story as much as I am, write in the comments, "She deserved to know," because Eleanor deserved it. And Robert's journey to find the truth was only just beginning. Robert began reading letter by letter, and with each word, each sentence, he felt as if he were being pulled into a story that surpassed anything he could have imagined. This wasn't just a collection of old documents. It was a woman's soul poured onto paper, the raw pain of a mother forced to make the cruelest decision anyone could face. Margaret Holloway was only 19 when Eleanor was born. 19. A young woman full of dreams, a life ahead of her, hopes that were brutally crushed by the rigid rules of a society that valued status above all else. And Eleanor's father, a poor artist named James Chen. When Robert read that name, his blood literally ran cold. Chen, the same last name as his. That couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably as he continued reading, desperately searching for more information, for some revelation that would confirm or destroy the suspicion that was growing inside him like a storm. And the story that unfolded in the letters was enough to break the heart of anyone who still believed in true love. Margaret and James fell in love in an overwhelming way, the kind of love that defies logic, ignores social barriers, and simply happens because two souls recognize each other. But Margaret's family was powerful, traditional, and inflexible. For them, that relationship was an unacceptable scandal, a stain on the Holloway reputation that needed to be erased immediately. When they discovered the key pregnancy, the pressure began. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't gentle. It was systematic, psychological, devastating manipulation. They cornered Margaret and gave her a cold, calculated ultimatum. Either she chose the family fortune, financial security, the Holloway name, or she chose love and her daughter, but would lose everything. Margaret was too young, too scared, too pressured. She didn't have the strength to fight against the ruthless mentality of that family that saw people as chess pieces. Under threats, emotional blackmail, and promises that Eleanor would have a better life without her, Margaret gave in, and that decision destroyed her for the rest of her life. Eleanor was raised by her paternal grandmother, inside that cold, rule-filled mansion, believing a lie that was repeated so many times that it became official truth. Her mother had died in childbirth. Margaret, according to the fabricated version, hadn't survived to meet her daughter, and Eleanor grew up carrying that pain, that emptiness, that absence that shaped her entire journey. But the hidden truth was completely different. Margaret never got over it. She never accepted it, never resigned herself to it, never stopped loving. For 40 long years, she wrote letters, birthday letters marking each year Eleanor turned, imagining how her daughter would be, if she would be happy, if she smiled often. Christmas letters wishing that, wherever she was, Eleanor would feel the love that transcended distance. Letters of forgiveness, apologizing for a choice she was forced to make, begging Eleanor to understand that it wasn't abandonment, it was survival under pressure. Letters of unconditional, pure, eternal love that didn't depend on physical proximity to exist. And in all those letters, Margaret revealed the truth. She spoke about James, about the love they shared, about how she was forced to choose, about how she never stopped searching, dreaming, hoping. She wrote as if Eleanor were reading, as if one day somehow those words would reach her daughter's heart and heal the wounds of a lifetime of lies. But Eleanor never received any of those letters, because someone in the family intercepted everything. Someone with enough power, enough coldness, with such a distorted mentality that they thought they were protecting the family name, when in reality they were building a wall of lies that irreversibly separated mother and daughter. Robert read and wept. He couldn't hold back the tears, streaming down his face as he absorbed the devastating impact of that revelation. Margaret had tried everything. She had hired investigators, gone to social events just to see Eleanor from afar, written and written and written, keeping alive the hope that one day the truth would prevail. But the inner workings of that powerful family were stronger. They controlled everything, the money, the information, the access, and they ensured that Margaret and Eleanor remained eternally separated, each believing in distorted versions of reality. And while Robert processed all of this, one question kept hammering in his mind. If James Chen was Eleanor's father, and if that James was who he thought he was, then what did that mean to him? What was his real connection to this story? And why had fate led him to that exact trunk at that moment, after so many years? Robert trembled in a way he had never experienced before. It wasn't fear, it wasn't cold. It was something much deeper and more disturbing. It was the feeling that the ground was disappearing beneath his feet, that everything he thought he knew about his own life was being rewritten at that very moment. The name James Chen appeared repeatedly in Margaret's letters, and each time Robert read that name, a new wave of questions exploded in his mind. He had never met his grandfather. Never. His father, a reserved man of few words about the past, always said the same thing when the subject came up. Your grandfather. Disappeared in the 70s. He left the family behind and never came back. It was a dry, emotionless sentence, repeated so many times that Robert had learned not to ask anymore. But what if that wasn't the whole story? What if that James Chen, the poor artist who fell in love with Margaret Holloway, was exactly the same man his father mentioned with such detachment. The possibility was so absurd, so statistically improbable, that Robert initially tried to dismiss the idea. Coincidences happen, right? Chen isn't such a rare surname. But something inside him, that deep instinct that can't be explained by logic, told him that this wasn't a coincidence. It was destiny. It was revelation. It was the hidden truth finally coming to light after decades buried. With his hands trembling uncontrollably, Robert dropped the letters and picked up the diary with its cracked leather cover. If there was any answer, any confirmation, it would be there. He opened the yellowed pages with extreme care, quickly flipping through them in search of any mention of the name that now echoed in his mind like an obsessive mantra. And then he found it. The date, 1977, and the words written in Margaret's delicate handwriting. James came to visit me for the last time. He said he had a son now, a boy named Thomas, my half-brother, my only connection to Dad. Robert's world stopped, literally stopped. Thomas, his father's name. The air escaped his lungs as if someone had punched him in the stomach. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't. But there it was, handwritten, dated, real. Thomas, James Chen's son, Eleanor's half-brother, the only connection she still had to the father she loved, but who had been forced to leave. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in such a frightening, perfect way that Robert felt dizzy. If James Chen was his grandfather, and if Eleanor was James's daughter, that meant Eleanor Holloway was his aunt, his blood aunt, a woman he never knew, who mysteriously disappeared in 1978, who lived her whole life believing lies, who never knew she had a mother who desperately loved her. And Robert was there, almost 50 years later, holding in his hands the truth that could have changed everything. The transformation that happened within him at that moment was absolute. He was no longer an outside observer, a professional fulfilling a task. He was inside the story. He was part of the story. Robert sat down again on the dusty attic floor, surrounded by letters, photographs and memories that now had a completely new meaning. This wasn't just the tragedy of an unknown family. It was his family. The story that had been erased, hidden, buried in that trunk that no one wanted during the auction. And now it made sense. Now he understood why he felt that inexplicable calling, that urgency to open the trunk when everyone else simply passed by it without interest. Destiny, or the universe, or some invisible force that moves things, had placed Robert exactly there at that moment, so that the truth could finally be revealed. The emotions that overwhelmed him were indescribable. Anger at the lies that had torn his family apart. Sadness for the pain Eleanor had carried without knowing that love awaited her. Gratitude for having found it before it was too late, and a fierce, unwavering determination to do something about it. He couldn't let that story end there. He couldn't simply close the chest and move on as if nothing had happened. Eleanor deserved to know. She deserved to see the letters her mother had written. She deserved to know that she had never been abandoned, that she had always been loved, that her entire life had been built on a lie that could now be undone. But where was Eleanor? She had disappeared in 1978, and it was 2025 now. 47 years. How old would she be? Would she still be alive? And if she was, how could Robert find her? The journey that began with opening a dusty trunk had now transformed into a personal, urgent mission, laden with an emotional impact that went far beyond the professional. If you believe that some stories need to be told, no matter how much time has passed, write in the comments, "The truth sets you free." Because Robert was about to embark on the most important quest of his life, and time was running out. With trembling hands and eyes red from crying, Robert continued reading letter after letter. Each envelope he opened was like opening a window directly into Margaret's shattered heart. He wasn't just reading words on paper. He was getting to know, intimately and painfully, the mother his Aunt Eleanor never had the chance to know. And the more he read, the more unbearable the emotional weight of that discovery became. Margaret spoke of regret with devastating honesty, of endless sleepless nights staring at the ceiling and wondering where Eleanor was, if she was happy, if anyone hugged her when she cried, if she knew how special she was. But what broke Robert's heart, most were the accounts of the times Margaret saw Eleanor from afar. Yes, she saw her, at social events, graduations, public celebrations of the Holloway family. Margaret would go there, hidden among trees, disguised among crowds, just to have a few seconds of visual connection with the daughter who had been taken from her. In a letter from 1969, Margaret wrote with a trembling voice across the paper, "You graduated today, my love, and I was there, hidden among the trees on campus, crying with pride. You looked so beautiful in white, with that smile that lit up everything around you. I wanted to run to you, hug you, shout to the world that you are my daughter. But all I could do was applaud silently and hope that somehow you felt that someone was there loving you with all the strength in the universe." Eleanor never knew. She never knew she had a mother in the audience, watching every important step of her life with a silent and painful love. She never knew she wasn't alone, even when she felt completely abandoned. And this revelation was like a stab in Robert's chest. To think that his aunt had lived believing she was unwanted, when in reality she was deeply loved, was such a great injustice that he could barely process it. Then he found the last letter, dated 1978, and the tone was different. There was urgency, there was despair, there was a sense of time running out. Margaret wrote, "I am ill. The doctors don't give me much time. My body is weak, but my soul has never been so determined. I hired a private investigator to find you, Eleanor, to deliver these letters to you personally, so that you know before I leave that you were always loved, that not a single day passed without me thinking of you, that my greatest pain is not dying, but dying without you knowing the truth. Please, my love, forgive me, not for the choice I made, because I had no choice, but for not being strong enough to fight them from the beginning." Margaret died 3 weeks after writing that letter. 3 weeks. And the investigator? He was hired, he started working, he was close to finding Eleanor. But then something happened that changed everything. The letters never reached the investigator. They were intercepted before they even left the property. And by whom? By Margaret's brother, the uncle who controlled the family fortune with an iron fist, who saw everything through the distorted lens of reputation and status. For him, those letters were a potential scandal, a threat to the Holloway name, a hidden truth that needed to remain buried. So he did the unthinkable. He took all 127 letters, Margaret's diary, the photographs, the ring that was meant for Eleanor, and locked it all in that trunk. He hid it in the darkest corner of the mansion's attic and ensured that no one would ever find them. His mentality was simple and cruel. What nobody knows can't hurt. And for decades, it worked. Margaret died without knowing that her last attempts to reach her daughter had been sabotaged. Eleanor continued living in ignorance, carrying a pain that could have been healed. And the uncle? He died years later, taking the secret to the grave, believing he had protected the family. But then, something happened in 1978 that no one expected. Eleanor somehow discovered fragments of the truth, not the whole story, but enough to know she had been deceived her entire life. And the decision she made was radical and definitive. She disappeared. She simply left the mansion, abandoned the fortune, severed all ties with the Holloway name, and vanished without a trace. It was a complete transformation. Eleanor Holloway ceased to exist, at least on paper, and for almost 50 years no one knew where she had gone or if she was still alive. Robert held the last letter in his hands and felt a determination growing within him like an unquenchable flame. He couldn't let this story end like this. He couldn't. Eleanor deserved to know that her mother never stopped fighting for her, that she wrote until her last breath, that she loved in such a pure and unconditional way that it spanned decades. And Robert now had a clear mission: to find Eleanor. It didn't matter where she was, it didn't matter how long it took. He was going to find her and deliver every single one of those letters. Robert couldn't stop. Sleeping became impossible. Eating seemed irrelevant. All that occupied his mind, every thought, every second of the day, was a single obsession: finding Eleanor. He needed to find her. If she was his aunt, if she was alive somewhere in this world, she deserved to know the truth. She deserved to receive the letters her mother wrote, with so much love and suffering. She deserved to know that she was never abandoned, that she was always wanted, that Margaret's love had endured for decades waiting for this moment of revelation. Robert knew that this journey wasn't just about delivering old letters. It was about justice, about healing, about giving Eleanor the chance to finally understand her own story. He started immediately. He hired private investigators, experienced professionals who specialized in finding people who had been missing for decades. He scoured public records for endless hours, browsing databases in Massachusetts, then expanding to every state in the country. He used social media, creating posts asking for information, joining genealogy groups, groups of people searching for lost relatives, and communities dedicated to reuniting separated families. He shared the story without revealing all the details, but enough to awaken people's empathy and willingness to help. But the clues were cold, very cold, frustrating. Eleanor had left Massachusetts in 1978, and from then on, it was as if she had simply evaporated. There were no death records in any state. There were no active bank accounts under the name Eleanor Holloway. There were no driver's licenses, tax returns, residential addresses, absolutely nothing. It was as if she had turned to smoke, dissolved into thin air without leaving a single digital or physical trace behind. And that made sense, in a terrible and logical way. If Eleanor had discovered that she had been deceived her entire life, that her identity was built on lies, then changing her name would be the most obvious decision. She would have started over from scratch, erasing any connection to her painful past. Weeks passed, and Robert felt the weight of frustration growing. Each dead end, each investigator returning empty-handed, each search that ended in nothing, was like a small death of hope. But he couldn't give up. He couldn't. Those letters in his hands, that story he now knew so deeply, that family connection he had just discovered, all of it pushed him forward even when logic said it might be impossible. Then Robert had an idea. It was a shot in the dark, but he was out of options. He took the black and white photograph of Eleanor he found in the trunk, an image from the 1970s, showing a young woman with expressive eyes and a shy smile, and Margaret's first letter, the one that read, "My dearest daughter, wherever you are." With slightly trembling hands, he posted both to a large online genealogy group, one of the largest and most active in the country. Along with the images, he wrote a simple but emotionally charged message. "I am looking for Eleanor Holloway, born in 1959. She disappeared in 1978. I have something that belongs to her, something that will change her life. If anyone knows her or has any information, please get in touch." Robert pressed the publish button and waited. The first few hours were silent. Then a few supportive comments began to appear, people wishing him good luck, sharing similar stories of family searches, but nothing concrete. He began to lose hope again. Maybe Eleanor had really disappeared forever. Maybe she had died somewhere without official record. Maybe this story would never have the ending it deserved. But then, exactly 48 hours after the post, Robert received a private message that literally made his heart stop. He was having coffee when the notification popped up on his phone. He clicked with trembling fingers and read, "I know this woman. She lives in a nursing home in Portland, Oregon. She hasn't been called Eleanor Holloway for decades, but I recognize that face. Those eyes. It's her. I'm absolutely sure." Robert's world froze. Portland, Oregon, across the country. And she was alive. Alive. After nearly 50 years missing, after being considered an unsolved mystery, Eleanor was alive. The emotional transformation that took place within Robert at that moment was indescribable. It was relief, it was euphoria, it was fear, it was anxiety, all mixed together in an overwhelming wave that left him breathless. He responded immediately, asking for more details, confirming information, trying not to seem too desperate, but failing completely at that. The person on the other end of the message explained that they had volunteered at that nursing home for years, and that Eleanor, though she used a different name now, was there, living a quiet and reserved life. She never talks about the past, the message said, but I always felt she carried something heavy, something unresolved. Maybe that's it. Robert wasted no time. He grabbed the entire trunk, bought a plane ticket to Portland that very night, and for the first time in weeks felt something he had almost forgotten. True hope. If you've ever felt that sensation of being so close to something that would change everything, write in the comments, almost there, because Robert was. He was hours away from an encounter that would rewrite the lives of two people and heal wounds of almost half a century. Robert took the first available flight to Portland with the entire trunk carefully packed beside him. He wouldn't entrust that treasure to the baggage compartment for anything in the world. During the 5-hour flight, he barely managed to close his eyes. His heart pounded so hard, so fast, that he felt the pulses reverberating throughout his body. It was an impossible mix of emotions: anxiety about how Eleanor would react, fear that it might be too late, hope that the truth could finally heal decades of pain, and an overwhelming urgency to make this work. He mentally rehearsed what he would say, how he would start the conversation, but nothing seemed adequate enough for such a monumental moment. When the plane landed, Robert took a taxi straight to the nursing home. It was a quiet, well-kept place, with green gardens and a peaceful atmosphere that contrasted completely with the emotional storm raging inside him. The volunteer who had sent the message was waiting for him at reception, and when she saw him enter with the wooden trunk in his arms, she placed her hand over her heart. "She's in the living room," she whispered. "Near the window, as always. But please, be gentle. She's fragile in a way that goes beyond the physical." Robert nodded, unable to speak. He walked through the silent corridors, each step seeming to last an eternity, until he reached the room illuminated by the soft afternoon light. And there, exactly where they had said she would be, sat a 66-year-old woman, her completely white hair tied in a simple bun, her tired eyes seemingly having seen more sorrow than anyone should bear, sitting in a rocking chair near the window, gazing at the garden with a distant expression. She was there, but she seemed to be somewhere else, lost in thoughts or memories that Robert now understood were too painful to be forgotten. He took a deep breath, adjusted the trunk in his arms, and approached slowly. When he was just a few steps away, he said in a trembling voice heavy with emotion, "Eleanor Holloway?" The reaction was instantaneous and devastating. She froze completely, her whole body stiffened, as if that name had the power to paralyze time. She turned her face slowly toward Robert, and in her eyes there was fear, confusion, and something that seemed like pure panic. "That name," she whispered, in a weak, broken voice, full of decades of repressed pain. "I haven't heard that name in 47 years. Who are you? How did you—" Robert sat in the chair beside her, carefully placing the trunk on the floor between them. "My name is Robert Chen," he began, observing her reaction to the surname. And he saw it. He saw her eyes widen, saw her breath catch. I believe I am your nephew, and I have something that belongs to you, something that should have reached you a long time ago." With trembling hands, he opened the trunk, and the scent of old paper, of preserved memories, filled the space between them. Robert began to take out the letters one by one, placing them in Eleanor's lap. She picked up each envelope with fingers that trembled so much they could barely hold it. She looked at the familiar handwriting on the front of each letter, at her name, written with such care, and tears began to fall. They weren't silent tears. They were deep sobs, decades of pain finally finding an outlet. "These are letters your mother, Margaret, wrote to you," Robert explained gently. 127 letters, over 40 years. She never stopped writing, she never stopped loving you. Eleanor opened the first letter with hands trembling uncontrollably. As she read, she wept so hard she could barely see the words through her tears. She loved me?" Eleanor asked, between sobs, looking at Robert with an expression of utter disbelief, as if it were too impossible to be true. "My mother loved me." Robert nodded, unable to speak, also crying now. "Every word in these letters answers that with a resounding yes," he managed to say. She loved you more than anything in this world, and she spent her whole life trying to reach you. Then Eleanor began to speak, and her story poured out like water dammed up for decades, finally finding a crack. She recounted how, in 1978, by pure accident, she had discovered hidden documents revealing that her mother hadn't died in childbirth, that Margaret was alive or had been until recently. The revelation completely destroyed her. Feeling betrayed, rejected, deceived by the entire family that raised her, Eleanor made the most radical decision of her life. She ran away. She changed her name, severed all ties with the Holloway fortune, and disappeared to live a simple, anonymous life, far from everything and everyone. "I thought she didn't want me," Eleanor whispered through tears. "I spent 47 years believing I was rejected, that I wasn't worthy of being loved." But there, in that moment, holding the letters that proved exactly the opposite, Eleanor finally knew the truth. And the transformation that occurred in her face was visible, palpable. It was as if a weight of decades had been lifted from her shoulders. Eleanor spent hours reading letter after letter, immersing herself deeply in every word her mother had written. She laughed through her tears as she read about the memories Margaret cherished, wept as she discovered how many times her mother had been present at important moments without her knowing, and felt an overwhelming mix of relief and sadness as she realized that all the suffering could have been avoided if the truth had triumphed over the lies. But then, when Eleanor picked up the last letter from the trunk, the one written in Margaret's final days, something shifted in the air. She held the envelope with an almost sacred reverence, as if she knew that these would be the last words her mother would ever write to her. With trembling fingers, she carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the yellowed paper. Then, her voice choked with emotion, between sobs that came from the deepest part of her soul, Eleanor began to read aloud. "Eleanor, my love, if you are reading this, then the impossible has happened. The truth has finally reached you." She paused, taking a deep breath, to continue. "I want you to know, every second without you was agony, but every letter I wrote was an act of faith. Faith that one day, somehow, you would know that I never abandoned you." Her voice broke completely at this point, and Robert had to hold her hand so she could continue. "You were the best part of me, and wherever I am now, I'll be waiting to hug you for the first time in 40 years. I love you, today and always. Mom." When Eleanor finished reading, the silence that filled the room was deafening. It wasn't an empty silence, but a silence laden with everything that couldn't be said in words. It was the weight of decades of separation, of lies broken, of a love that survived time and death. Eleanor held the letter to her chest and cried in a way that seemed to release 47 years of accumulated pain. Robert waited, respecting that sacred moment. And then, when Eleanor finally managed to breathe again, he knew the time had come to reveal the last piece of truth. "Eleanor," he began softly, "there's something else you need to know." She lifted her red, swollen eyes to him, still holding the letter. Robert took a deep breath and spoke the words that would change everything once more. "James Chen, the man your mother loved, your father, was my grandfather. We are family." The revelation hit Eleanor like a wave. She looked at Robert as if she was seeing a ghost, as if reality were rearranging itself before her eyes. You are—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Robert nodded, also crying now. "You're my aunt, and I've spent my whole life not knowing you existed, just as you spent your life not knowing about your mother. Our family was separated by decisions we didn't make, by truths that were hidden from us. But now the truth has finally found us." And then something happened that Robert would never forget for the rest of his life. Eleanor, that 66-year-old woman who carried the weight of almost 5 decades of loneliness, pain, and imagined rejection, smiled. It was a small smile at first, hesitant, as if she had forgotten how to truly do it. But then the smile grew, illuminating her face in a way that seemed impossible moments before. It was a genuine smile, full of relief, renewed hope, a profound transformation happening in real time. For the first time in almost half a century, Eleanor Holloway truly smiled. I had lost everything, she whispered, still smiling through her tears. I lost my mother without ever knowing. I lost my father before I understood who he was. I spent my whole life feeling like a piece that didn't fit anywhere. She squeezed Robert's hand with surprising strength. But now I've discovered I had a mother who loved me until her last breath. And I've gained an entire family I never knew I had. You're here. You found me. And that means I was never truly alone. The emotional impact of that moment was impossible to quantify. Robert and Eleanor stood there, holding each other's hands, connected by blood ties that had been hidden but never broken. The journey that began with a dusty trunk that no one wanted at an auction had led to this moment of profound healing, of life-changing revelations, of a family reuniting across decades and lies. Eleanor took the gold ring with the blue stone from the bottom of the chest, the ring Margaret had wanted her to have, and put it on her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "My mother chose this for me," she said, admiring the stone that sparkled in the light. "And now I'm wearing it. Even after everything, it's still with me." If this story is deeply touching your heart, write in the comments, "Family always finds a way," because it's true. Even when everything seems lost, even when decades separate, true love and blood ties have a way of finding their way back. And for Eleanor and Robert, that path was only beginning to be rebuilt. Today, in May 2025, Eleanor no longer lives alone in that Portland nursing home. She lives with Robert and his family in Massachusetts, in the same city where it all began, but now under a completely different light. The house is full of life, laughter, and conversations around the dinner table that stretch for hours. Eleanor has finally met the rest of the family she never knew she had. Cousins, nephews, a whole network of people who welcomed her with open arms, as if she had always belonged there. And in a way, she always did. It just took almost 5 decades for the truth to bring her back home. And the trunk, that dark wooden trunk that no one wanted during the auction, ignored by collectors and curious onlookers, that spent 47 years hidden in the darkest corner of a dusty attic. It now occupies a place of honor in Robert's living room. It's no longer locked. It's open, displaying the carefully preserved letters, the photographs that tell stories of love and separation, Margaret's diary that Eleanor reads and rereads whenever she needs to feel the presence of the mother she never met personally, but now knows deeply through words. That trunk has become the most valuable object in the house, not for the money, because it's worthless financially speaking, but for what it represents. It is living proof that true love never dies, even when silenced, even when hidden, even when decades of lies try to erase it. But Eleanor didn't stop there. When she discovered that she was technically still the legal heir to the Holloway family fortune that had grown during the years the mansion was sealed, she made a decision that surprised everyone, but made perfect sense to those who knew her story. She donated everything. Every penny went to institutions that help mothers and children separated by difficult circumstances, family reunification programs, shelters for vulnerable mothers, and organizations that fight against the forced separation of families. In a moving interview with a local newspaper, Eleanor explained her decision with simple but powerful words. "My mother couldn't reach me because of people who valued money and status above love. But I can guarantee that other mothers and children will never miss this chance. If this fortune can prevent even one child from growing up believing they are unloved, then it will finally have some real value." The impact of Eleanor's actions was profound and immediate. Hundreds of families have already benefited from the program she funded. Mothers found children. Children discovered truths that had been hidden. And each reunion, each tear of joy, each hug that happened because of Eleanor's generosity was a way of honoring Margaret, the mother who never gave up, even when all seemed lost. Robert, for his part, is still an auctioneer. He continues working, visiting old mansions, appraising forgotten objects, organizing sales. But now he does something different. At each auction, he tells this story. He talks about the chest that nobody wanted, about the hidden letters, about the journey that changed his life and his aunt's life. And he always ends with the same message. Sometimes the items that nobody wants hold the treasures that everyone needs. Don't judge by what seems valuable on the surface. Sometimes the real treasure is hidden in what everyone ignores. People at the auctions listen in respectful silence. Many leave with a different mindset, paying more attention to forgotten objects, dusty boxes, and stories that may be waiting to be discovered. Some have even contacted Robert afterward, sharing their own stories of family discoveries, revealed secrets and truths that have finally come to light. And that dusty trunk, which spent 47 years waiting in the dark, silent, ignored, rejected, it proves something fundamental about life. Some stories never truly end. They just wait. They wait for the right moment, the right person, the right courage to be told. And when they are finally revealed, they have the power to transform lives, to heal wounds that seemed permanent, to reconnect what was brutally separated. You've made it this far, to this very moment, because this story touched something deep within you. And I truly want to thank you for staying with me until the end, because stories like this only make sense when they find someone willing to truly listen, to feel, to reflect. And you were that person today. Look, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, now is the perfect time to hit that subscribe button. Because I bring you stories like this every week, real moving stories that touch us, that make us see life in a different way. And I want you here with me on this journey, being part of this community that values what really matters, connection, truth, and genuine emotion. And since we've made it this far together, please leave a like on the video. It shows me that the content resonated with you, and it helps me continue creating stories that truly touch people's hearts. Every like is an encouragement, a confirmation that I'm on the right track, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Now write in the comments, "I'm with you until the end." That way I know you really followed every word, every revelation, every emotion of this story. And if you want, tell me, have you ever discovered a family secret? Have you ever found something hidden that changed the way you see things? I read all the comments and I love hearing your stories. And look, there's a video right here that will perfectly complement this topic. It's a story that also involves unexpected discoveries, hidden truths, and the power of love that transcends time. Click there and continue watching, because I guarantee you won't regret it. Until the next video. And remember, some stories just need someone brave enough to open the treasure chest. Maybe you are that person in your own family. A big hug, and see you soon.